Well,
Good morning. Yes, how are you, James?
Doing
Thanks
well, thank
everyone
you.
for joining us this morning. We'll begin with a roll call, a call to order, and we'll ask that as we go through that you indicate your presence when your name is called. I'll also flag now and repeat again that because we are recording, it would be helpful if you can state your name when you introduce yourself each time you speak. And with that, we'll begin with a roll call.
Claudio Gualtieri,
Here.
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Present.
Commissioner Michael Gilbert from DSS,
Here.
and Manisha Jutani. Not here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And having demonstrated the presence of a quorum, we'll move on to our business for today. Again, I'll just remind you if you can introduce yourself when you speak, and I'll note that roll call votes will be taken after each action item, and we have 3 action items expected today. With that, I will entertain a motion to approve our November 12th, 2021 Finance Committee regular meeting minutes.
So moved. Tom
Thank you.
McNeil.
Thank you, Thomas, for moving. Do I have a second?
Second, Mike Gilbert.
Mike Gilbert, second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's proceed to a roll call vote to adopt the minutes.
Claudio Gualtieri,
Yes?
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Michael Gilbert,
Yes.
Manisha Jutani. Thank you.
Great. That brings us to the substantive piece of our meeting today. We'll be reviewing the third quarter budget. We have in this segment 3 votes to take, and I'm going to turn it over and introduce Daryl Jones, our Director of Finance, who's going to walk through a presentation. I think it's best if we get through as much of the presentation, at least the main piece of it, and then maybe take questions at the end of the segment. Daryl, is that your preference?
Sure. So you want me to go through the entire presentation? I could do that. Is that what you want? You want me to stop at each section?
Stop at each vote. So each sort of big segment, finish a whole segment, and then we can take questions.
Will do.
Okay.
Absolutely. Right. All right. Good morning. My name is Daryl Jones, and I'm Director of Finance for Access Health. This morning, I'm going to present the fiscal year 2022 budget report, the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget, the assessment status, and a proposed assessment recommendation. And finally, I'll give a brief update on grants and projects. Next slide. So let's first turn to the fiscal year 2022 budget report and talk about what happened during the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year. And then I'll talk about the proposed changes for the final fiscal year 2022 budget. Next slide. So at the summary level, how did we perform for the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year ending March 31? So our budget was $39.2 million and our actuals were $36.2 million. So we were under budget by $3 million. So why were we under budget by $3 million? Mainly due to timing. Next slide, please. So let's take a closer look at the details of the budget versus actuals through March 31st, 2022. So under this section for revenues were under budget by $439,000 due to timing of $210,000, and the assessment revenue for the second half of the fiscal year was under budget by $219,000. Under the section for expenses, we were $2.4 million under budget due to timing. So what that means, the project started late or employees were hired after the start of the fiscal year. Next slide. So now let's turn to the fiscal year 2022 proposed final budget summary. The proposed final budget will remain $54.3 million from the approved adjusted budget from the last November's board meeting. However, there are changes within the budget line items which will require the approval of this committee. Next slide, please. So let's look at those changes. Under the revenue section, we are increasing the grants by $25,000 for the Broker Academy. Next, we're transferring from the reserve fund $440,000 for the All Players Claims Database, which was a legislative mandate. Finally, the marketplace assessment revenue declined by $442,000 from the second half of this fiscal year. So under expense budget, we're lowering the salaries and fringe benefits by $345,000 because employee turnover and lower medical insurance costs. We added $189,000 to cover the gap for the vacant positions. And then we're adding the cost for All Payers Claim Database. And we're saving $237,000 for IT enhancements because projects came in lower than expected. And finally, because of the pandemic, our travel is under budget by $50,000. I'll move to the next slide. Now, I'm going to provide an update on the reserve fund balance. At the end of this last fiscal year, 2021, Access Health reserve balance was $23.9 million. And our fiscal year 2022 is projected to be at $20.8 million at the end of this fiscal year. The changes during the fiscal year 2022 is mainly due to $1.8 million of unplanned budgeted items, which were ARPA, Cover Connecticut, and APCD. So the projected fund balance reserve of $20.8 million at the end of this fiscal year represents 7.1 months of operating funding. Next slide, please. And I'll stop here and turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, Daryl, for that presentation. At this point, we're going to need to approve. We're going to entertain a motion to approve the FY22 Q3 budget as presented by Daryl, the exchange staff, to us here today. Do I have a motion to do so?
Tom McNeil, I move we approve it.
Thank you, Tom. Motion to approve is on the table. Do I have a second?
Mike Gilbert, second.
Thank you, Mike. Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion before we take a vote? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote on approving of the FY22 Q3 budget report as presented by the exchange staff.
Claudio Galtieri,
Yes?
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Mikey Gilbert,
Yes.
Manish Sutani. Thank you.
Daryl, do
ready
you
for-
want to continue to the next
Sure.
piece?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay.
Next
Thank
slide,
you.
please. So now we'll move to the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget. The focus of the budget is on our three strategic initiatives: IT investment, cybersecurity, and health disparities. But in addition, the budget is to continue to support our staff and our mission at Access Health. Next slide. In our proposed fiscal year 2023 budget, we will cover the high-level summary, the details of the proposed budget, and the shared cost budget with the Department of Social Services. Next slide, please. So overall, our proposed budget for fiscal year 2023 will be $55 million, which is a $550,000 increase from the prior fiscal year. Next slide, please. So let's look at the detail of the proposed budget. First, looking at the revenue section. Here, we're adding $1.2 million from our reserve fund to fund new system enhancements. Next, our market assessments will be $32.8 million, which represents a $1.4 million increase in assessments beginning January 2023. Moving to the budget expenses, we have increased the salary by $473,000 for hiring additional staff instead of contracting out and budgeted salary increases. Also, medical costs and fringe benefits will increase by $355,000 due to increased medical costs and benefits. In addition, there is a reduction of $715,000 in the contractual line because of Cover Connecticut was completed and Access Health eliminated or reduced longstanding contracts by hiring 3 internal employees. And the IT enhancement budget line increased nearly by $1 million due to new system enhancements. Next slide, please. Go back one. There you go. Thank you. On the last section of the proposed budget is the share costs with the Department of Social Services. The state general fund will remain flat for fiscal year 2023 at $20.5 million, and the federally funded $688,000 was removed for inactivity. And I'll stop there at this point and turn it back to you, Chair.
Yes, thanks, Daryl. And I now recognize why you gave a little bit of a pause. I rushed through that first part of the presentation because in addition to accepting the Q3 budget report, I think we need 2 smaller but critical changes, and we need votes for both of those. So
Sure.
Before we take the vote on the FY23 budget, I want us to just reflect back. There were 2 changes that Daryl reflected in his earlier presentation, and one was related to the all-payer claims database, the legislatively mandated requirement. So we would adjust the budget by $440,120 to fund that mandated cost. There was also $25,000 in additional expenses for the Broker Academy. Both of these he highlighted in his presentation. But we do need a separate vote, a motion and a vote to approve those changes. So I will request a motion to approve the 2 non-budgetary expenses, again, for FY22 adjusted budget, the first being the $440,120 for the mandated APCD, and the second, the $25,000 for the Brokers Academy.
So moved. Mike Gilbert.
Thank you, Mike.
Tom McNeil, seconded.
Thank you, Tom. Motion is moved and seconded. Any discussion on those 2 items? If not, I'd request a roll call vote.
Claudio Galtieri,
Yes?
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Mikey Gilbert,
Yes.
and Manisha Zutani. Thank you.
There's one more procedural vote that's required here. This is Claudio, sorry. I should follow my own rule. And the procedural vote is to just move from our reserves that $440,120 to fund the APCD. So with that, I would request a motion to approve a transfer of $440,120 from the reserves for the mandated APCD costs for FY22 budget.
Tom McNeil, so moved.
Thank you, Tom. Motion is moved.
Second, Mike Gilbert.
It's Claudio. Thanks, Mike. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? If not, I'll ask for a roll call vote on this last of 3 votes on the FY22 budget and presentation.
Claudio Galtieri,
Yes?
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Mikey Gilbert,
Yes.
and Manisha Zutani. Thank you.
Now, Daryl, if you'll be so kind to fast forward, yes, thank you, to the 23 proposed budget. Daryl has gone through and described the proposed FY23 budget. In that respect, I would request a motion to recommend for approval by the board of the FY23 operating budget as Daryl and the exchange staff have presented and showcased for us today.
Tom McNeil, I move we approve it.
Thank you, Tom.
2023 budget. Yep.
Do I have a second?
Second, Mike Gilbert.
Thank you, Mike. Motion is moved and seconded. I'll rephrase again before we take the vote. This motion is to recommend for approval by the board the FY23 operating budget as presented by the exchange staff. All those in favor will signify by saying aye, and the roll call will be taken.
Claudio Gualtieri,
Aye.
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Aye.
Mikey Gilbert,
Yes.
and Manish Jutani. Thank you.
There's one more motion. This is Claudia. We need one more motion on this before we can move on. And that is a motion to approve a transfer of 1.2 million from the reserves to fund the IT systems enhancements as set forth and described in the FY23 budget. Do I have a motion to make such transfer?
Tom McNeil, so moved.
Thank you, Tom. Motion is on the table.
Mike Gilbert, second.
Mike, thank you. Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that item? If not, we'll take a roll call vote to approve the motion to transfer 1.2 million from the reserves to fund the IT systems enhancements as set forth in the FY 2023 budget.
Claudio Gualtieri,
Yes?
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Mikey Gilbert,
Yes.
and Manish Jutani. Thank you.
The next segment of our meeting here today, I'll turn it back to Daryl for a presentation on the assessment. We will also require a vote in this segment.
Well, thank you, Chair. So the next part of the budget presentation is on the assessment. I'm going to talk about the outlook of the assessment, revenue, and operating costs. How has Access Health been addressing the challenges, our proposed recommendation, and the impact to our consumers? Next slide, please. So first, what is the assessment revenues and the operating cost outlook? Assessment revenues have been declining for the past 3 fiscal years, while operating costs have increased and are projected to outpace revenues on average by 2.8 million through fiscal year 2025. Next slide, please. So why are revenues going down and operating costs are rising? Well, the revenues are going down because of the decline in small group market caused by employers moving to self-insured products. While on the other hand, operating costs are increasing because of requirements by CMS, the state, and the Internal Revenue Service. For example, the ever-changing digital environment, the legislative requirement to fund the all-payer claims database, and implement system changes, and to marketing new special enrollments. Next slide, please. So how has Access Health addressed the fiscal challenges? First, we lowered operational costs by 10%, and we created efficiencies to meet the organizational objectives. For example, 3 to 4 years ago, we went to our vendors and asked them to lower the cost by 10%. They had originally built in higher costs because Access Health was new and was just getting started. But now, since we are a more mature company, we ask for those cuts. Secondly, Access Health utilized 2.5 million in reserves for unexpected projects and initiatives, and the recent approval of 1 million for reserves for fiscal year 2023. Finally, we have actively applied for grants, and so far we've been awarded 1 million in grants for IT projects. However, to sustain the level of support and service our customers need and to support our core mission and vision, Access Health recommends additional funding for fiscal year 2023. Next slide, please. Our proposed recommendation is to increase the assessment rate from 1.65 to 1.80%. This will generate an additional 2.8 million in revenue, which includes 1.4 million for fiscal year 2023 budget. This will fund the all-payer claims database, address declining revenues, and rising operational costs. The assessment rate will be effective January 1st, 2023. Next slide, please. So how does Access Health compare to other exchanges? First, Access Health has not raised the assessment rate for over 7 years. Second, Even increasing the assessment rate to 1.80, Access Health will still have the lowest rate in the country. Next slide, please. So what is the assessment rate impact on our customers? In determining the impact to customers, Access Health worked with Julie Andrews, who's a senior consultant actuary who works for Wakely Consultant and provides assessment revenue projections and plan designs for Access Health. So the impact to consumers is that the average premium cost before subsidies will increase on average by $1 per month for each individual consumer who buys individual, small group, and dental plans. Whereas customers who receive advanced premium tax credits will see an average reduction of 5 cents per month. Currently, 83% of QHP enrollees receive an advanced premium tax credit to reduce monthly premiums. Now I'm going to stop here and I'm going to turn it over to Julie to provide a more in-depth discussion on the impact of premiums. Julie, are you there?
Yes, I'm on.
Thank you.
Good morning. So I just wanted to go and discuss a little bit more about the modeling. So the dollar reflects on the gross premiums, the additional 15 basis point increase in the assessment. For the determination of the net premium change, what we did was we used a census of all on-exchange enrollees in 2021 with their income status. And so what is happening is that while we're increasing the assessment by about $1, we're also increasing the benchmark premium by about $1 that is can be used by enrollees to reduce their premium costs, so therefore increasing their subsidy by $1. Because of different income statuses, not all individuals being eligible for subsidies, and different limits on the amount of subsidies they can use based on the federal percent of premium responsibility limits. The average amount of net premium that individuals will see with the additional subsidies that they'll be receiving is about a 5 cent per reduction in their net premiums. And does anybody have any questions?
Looks like Mr. Chairman has a question.
Yes.
Cody, I think your hand is up on the screen.
It's up.
Yes, I mean, yeah.
No, I was just
Okay.
listening intently. I
Okay.
think
Okay.
I think you did a good job of describing
Right. What's
Good.
Mr. Gilbert?
Yes, thank you, Julie. Mike Gilbert. Julie, I'm sorry, I just wanted to understand the context. If you could clarify, is this the impact after the increased federal subsidies that are currently in place, at least through January 1st, 2023, or is this the impact on sort of the baseline supports?
This was based on the current existing subsidy arrangements under ARPA, which you're referring to, that terminates in December of this year. So under the non-ARPA or the early 2021 rules, there will be a few more individuals that would not be eligible for subsidies. So the average reduction of 5 cents may go up slightly.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this piece? This is Claudio. Are there any other questions on this presentation? Being none, Daryl, are we in position? Is there anything more you'd like to say, or are we in position for a vote on this piece?
It's at the position for you to vote on it.
Great. So this is Claudio. Thank you, Daryl. We've heard here the request to increase the assessment Connecticut's assessment, I think recapping it, Connecticut's assessment, the net effect will still maintain us as the lowest assessment as compared to other state exchanges and the federally maintained exchanges. We seem to need this as a result of some of the ongoing costs, in addition to the mitigation efforts that we've already put in place, like trying to reduce some of our operating costs and get better deals with our contracted services and create efficiencies. And the net impact for many of the enrollees, given that 83% of them get subsidies, would be negligible, if not a small reduction on average of 5 cents. Even for those in total, the average premium would just be increased by $1 before the subsidies. So with that summary of the assessment, I would ask for a motion. Thomas, sorry, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a question about the, I'm just curious, have we always had the lowest assessment? Or does
Yes, yes, Tom. We've always had it since we started.
And the assessment hasn't changed in the past 7 years, I think I heard?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Just to put a bit more in context, I think Darrell alluded to this earlier. When I was head of operations, we went back and asked our scanning, printing, and posting vendor to take a 10% cut on their cost to us over a 3-year period. Because we know, like most vendors, we're brand new. They had to assume a great number of risk in their pricing to Access Health. So we felt that after 5-6 years of an operation, those risks were removed. And they easily agreed to reduce the operating cost. That's how we've been able to maintain, in addition to being more efficient. So that's how we have not had to re-increase our assessment. And I just asked for an increase to the assessment. Also, we've been leveraging our reserves strategically as well. But we do know that asking for an assessment increase is pretty impactful to everyone. So we try to be very good stewards of the resources that we collect from the industry.
Thanks.
All right, any other questions before I ask for the motion to approve? Seeing none, I'll ask for a motion to recommend for approval by the Board of Directors for calendar year 2023, the exchange market assessment rate of 180 basis points.
So moved. Mike Gilbert.
Tom McNeil, I second it.
Thank you, Mike and Tom. The motion has been approved, has been made and seconded. Are there any, seeing no other questions, we can proceed right to a roll call vote on approval.
Claudio Gualtieri,
Yes.
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Michael Gilbert,
Yes.
and Manish Dani. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to our next segment on the agenda, which is an update on grants and projects. I'll turn it back to Darrell, our Director of Finance, who will present on an update on all of those items.
Well, thank you, Chair. The final 3 slides is an update on grants and projects. Next slide, please. On grants, we applied to 5 grants and we have been awarded 2 grants. One was for CMS grant for $1.1 million, and the other grant was for $25,000 to fund the Broker Academy. So the CMS grant projects are in progress and expected to be completed by September 2022. Next slide. For the capital improvement projects, we have 2 projects funded from the reserve. One is pending approval from DSS, and the other project is pending review by Access Health. Next slide, please. Finally, we had 3 projects that were carried over from last fiscal year and all have been completed. And that ends my report. I'll turn it back to you, Chair.
Great. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, that completes our formal agenda for today. And so the only item of business left before us is a request that we adjourn the meeting.
Tom McNeil, so moved.
Motion to adjourn has been moved.
Mike Gilbert, second.
Mike, thank you. My trusty 1-2 punch on approval of all motions. With that, I'll just ask for a roll call on the motion to adjourn.
Claudio Gualtieri,
Yes?
Victoria Veltri, Thomas McNeil,
Yes.
Mike Gilbert,
Yes.
and Manish Sujani. Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. Have a good long weekend. For those of you that are able to celebrate the holiday or just enjoy some time outside and hopefully some good weather.
Thank you very
Absolutely.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Take care.
Thank you all very much, all.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.